I just finished making the pearl vest. It is a pattern by More CA Knits. And, as someone who just saw the vest and was like, you know what, I have to make that. And I looked at the pattern and I realized it's an intermediate pattern. It took a lot of time to make it. I think this took me about 2 months to actually finish. And there was a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of frogging. So today I want to go through a few questions that I think I would have liked answered before I started this. Was this pattern easy to follow? There were a lot of techniques that you had to learn. A lot of European foundations with the German short rows, Norwegian, I think, holds with how you hold your knitting needles, Italian bind off, 3 needle bind off, making buttonholes. That was something I had to learn. I think as a beginner, you're definitely spending a lot of your time just looking up tutorials because it is really hard to keep track of. And I learned a lot of them, but I also don't remember how to do a single one of them. The pattern has a lot of links to the artists doing their own techniques, so it is really easy to follow. Sometimes I found other videos easier, but they're all readily available. What yarn did I use? I used a wool called a Heritage 6, which is by Cascade Yarns, and this was so soft. If anyone's looking for a relatively cheap yarn to use, this was only $12, and I used 3 and just a little more to make a medium size vest. So I would buy 4 of this if you're making anywhere between like a small to medium, I would say. Only $12, so $48 in materials is actually really good. I find that superwash merino stretches when you wash it and block it, and I wanted that kind of flexibility with this vest. But it's also warm without being too suffocating. As for needles, I use the Knit Picks brand that I literally bought just for this project. As far as premium knitting needles go, these are not expensive at all because I know they can go up to like $150 to $200, and this was maybe $70. I did have to buy another set of needles, so I used the 4mm needles and then the 3mm needles as I was going through this. Do you need to swatch? I always want to say the answer is yes, and every pattern will say that you need to swatch to match the pattern and design measurements and all that. It gives you like a 10 centimeter ease with your measurements. So whatever size you end up making, you should have about 10 centimeters of give. I did make a gauge swatch just because I was like, oh, you know what? We're turning over a new leaf for swatching all our clothes this year. And when I did that, I ended up with like a medium pattern. I can't remember the measurements. I'll put it up here, but I actually ended up making a extra small. My size was actually smaller than the smallest size that they offered. And you know what? It still fits great. I guess I tend to knit tight compared to the measurements. Using the same rows and everything, I ended up with a smaller size. But I am not unhappy with my sizing at all, considering what happened. There's a lot of ease in the vest and how it will fit you. If you think you tend to knit tight, make a size larger. If you tend to knit loose, make a size down a little bit, and you'll be fine either way. How long did the pattern take me? On my app, my row counter app, I think I logged about 55, 56 hours. That doesn't really include all the time that I spent frogging, which probably amounted to at least a dozen hours. So altogether, maybe around 70 hours. I think I started this maybe back in the middle of March, April, towards the end of March. And I only finished it, a couple of days ago in the beginning of June. I know it's not a race, but I really hope the next project I really hope the next project I finish a little bit quicker. Did you have to frog a lot? Yes.
Rabbit, 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 rabbit.
Not really because of the fault of the pattern. As a beginner, I was learning a lot of new techniques and I was a little confused by the explanations. But once I got it down, I was able to repeat because, it's a vest. Whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other. And it actually worked out pretty well. Once I got the technique down, I was able to apply it to the other side. But some sections did take me quite long. Like it took me sometimes 3, 4, 5 attempts to make progress on like 3 or 4 rows because I kept messing up increases or certain kinds of German short rows. That one was a doozy to learn. I did spend quite a few hours just frogging and redoing work because of silly little mistakes, dropping stitches in the middle and the end. Good news is that there is a tutorial for everything, for any kind of stitch that you drop. I dropped a lot of German short rows. I dropped a lot of stitches where I was supposed to increasing. I dropped a lot of stitches where towards the end I was trying to fix. Also, don't go back. I would recommend not frogging because of tension, because there are portions of this vest that I frogged because I didn't like the tension. It was too tight or whatever. In my panic, I sometimes undid the row and laddered all the way up for like half of these because you can tell, it feels bumpy. You know what? It doesn't show on the right side where all the V's are, so it's fine. Don't look at the inside. Don't look at the wrong side. The garter side looks a little off, but that's on the inside, so you know what? Who cares? How is the vest put together? I read somewhere that there are people that prefer sweaters that go top down and some that go bottom up. I think a lot of sweaters nowadays, from what I've vaguely seen, is that they go top down. This one is also knit top down with the back panels first complete. And then once you get down to like a certain level, once you connect them and get down to a certain level, you start connecting the front panels, and then you connect everything and then go in a really long back and forth until you reach the very bottom. And then once you reach the very bottom, you add in your ribbing from your arms and then your neck and then your bottom down. How do you remember the difference between M1R and M1L? Before I Googled this and learned that there's a very well-known mnemonic for remembering this, being I left through the front door, I'll be right back, which is just to say when you're making a left-leaning increase, you go to the front to back. When you're making a right-leaning increase, you go from right to front. In my head, the first thing that I thought of was RBF, resting bitch face. If you're make one right-leaning increase, you are going RBF, right, back, front. And then if it's not M1R, it's just the other ones. It's you go through the front to back. I don't really have an order for these stitches, just some miscellaneous notes that came up when I was making the pattern and wanted to remember for the future. First one is one that I kind of struggled with a lot. And when you're making these edges for the your armholes and your neck, she does it in a style where you fold over the ribbing. When you are picking up the stitches to do the armbands, you are asked to put in a contrasting color yarn as well to kind of help you see the stitches, because when you're folding over, you have to go back and bind everything off and all that. First time I did this, I made a mistake of picking up all the stitches, started my knitting, and then, after I did row 1, I promptly cut off my contrasting color and took it off because that's what I thought it was for. If you read the pattern, she actually doesn't tell you to cut it off until you're done folding it over and binding it off. So don't do what I did. I just finished my right side a little while ago, and for the most part, it doesn't look too bad. You see the same kind of clean-ish seam, until you realize that this portion, you see the chain on the outside. It's supposed to be on the inside. I don't know how this happened, but anyone else who's trying to do a double fold over knit edge, make sure you are picking up stitches on the right side. I think I must have swapped how I was picking up stitches at some point, because that was at the base. You can only make that mistake when you are just starting out. Something that I wished I did a lot better at throughout the pattern was having a much cleaner edges, because the edges, you actually use a lot to pick up stitches when you are putting on ribbing. And I didn't really think about that until I put on the ribbing, and I'm like, why can't I see my edges? Some of my edges were they were too tight. Some of them were a little bit loose. Some of them were just a little uneven and hard to find. For some reason, this one line confused me a lot. She'll say with right side facing and then go on to the rest of the pattern. She doesn't say with right side facing you. When she says with right side facing, that's towards you, not away. There was one day in Michael's that I was just perusing the buttons and I saw one that was on clearance and I thought they would look really freaking cool. So I bought 100 of them because it came in packs of 100. And now I have 100 to use. I am down 5 on this one, and I don't know what to do with the next 95 buttons. Don't buy 100 of them. Just buy however many you need. The pattern recommends 4 or 5, depending on whether you like it wider or, narrower spaces. So, can you do this pattern as a beginner? Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm not someone who gets discouraged by something that's just because it says it's hard and I have no idea how to do it. You know what? There's a tutorial online for literally everything. So I did it little bit by little bit. It took probably twice as amount of time as someone who I think is just starting out. But you know what? It was a lot of fun learning all these new fancy European techniques for shaping and casting off and this and that. But if you're confused at any point, you can shoot the artist a message on Etsy or Ravelry. I'm sure she responds. I didn't. I just kind of just finagled my way through. Or if you want to leave a comment below, I can do my best to help. Or if another knitter sees it, maybe they can also respond and offer a little bit of IT assistance. I'll put a link down below for some of the resources that I used that I found really helpful. There was a graphic on Reddit that I thought was amazing for Italian bind-offs. Some of the German short rows, I had to learn how to pick up those drop stitches, which was really a panic at the beginning. If you're interested in buying the pattern, obviously it's not my pattern, but I actually really enjoyed it and I would absolutely make it again for someone else. If you're thinking about picking up the pattern, highly recommend it. I thought it was a very well-written pattern with all the sizing and instructions and guidelines and resources. So, if you like how the vest looks, I think it looks amazing. I think it feels amazing. I am very excited to try to see if she comes out with any other kind of patterns that kind of are my vibe. But yeah, with that, on to the next one. Bye.